For centuries, the story of the creation of Eve has been familiar to many of us. It's been taught in Sunday schools, painted on the walls of chapels, and preached from pulpits around the world. The narrative goes that Eve was formed from a rib taken from Adam's side. It's a comforting image, a simple, poetic story that makes sense within the traditional framework. But what if this widely accepted version isn't entirely accurate? What if the Bible itself doesn't actually say Eve was created from Adam's rib at all? This idea might sound shocking at first, but when we take a closer look at the original Hebrew text, a different story emerges, one that not only changes the way we view the creation of Eve, but also transforms how we understand the unity between man and woman and the very meaning of creation itself. This is not just a question of a mistranslation. It's a revelation that has the potential to shake the foundation of traditional thinking, theology, and even the way we've understood the relationship between men and women for centuries. Imagine for a moment, instead of Eve being created from a small, insignificant bone, what if she was made from something much greater, something that would challenge everything we've been taught? What if the Bible doesn't speak of a rib at all, but of something far more substantial, something that could change the way we understand the image of God, creation, and the divine plan for humanity? This is the discovery that the Ethiopian Bible whispers from its forgotten pages. It's a truth so ancient, so profound, that once you hear it, you can never unhear it. Tonight, let's return to the beginning of the story. Let's go back to Eden and explore this shocking secret hidden within the original text. The key to this mystery lies in a single word, a word that, when translated correctly, opens the door to a completely new understanding of creation. This is the word that has the power to rewrite the origin of woman, the mystery of unity, and the very meaning of life itself. Chapter 1. The Rib That Never Was. The story of Eve's creation is so familiar that most of us have never questioned its details. It's woven into the fabric of our religious education, passed down from generation to generation. The scene is set. Adam, alone in the Garden of Eden, lies asleep, surrounded by the animals, the trees heavy with fruit. God reaches down and takes one of Adam's ribs, and from that rib, Eve is formed. It's a beautiful, poetic image. It speaks of companionship, of unity, and of the sacred act of creation. It's what almost every child learns in Sunday school, and it's what's often painted on the walls of churches. But let's pause for a moment and ask a very simple question. Why a rib? Why was Eve created from a rib, and not from the same substance that Adam was made of, dust? After all, God had created Adam from dust. Why not use the same material again for Eve's creation? Why a rib? Why not a lock of hair or a drop of blood, or even nothing at all? Since, after all, God could have simply created Eve from nothing. This question opens a door to a deeper mystery, one that many people have never dared to explore. And the answer doesn't lie in tradition, in paintings, or in sermons. It lies in the Hebrew language itself. The word used in the text for the material from which Eve was created is tzila, a word that has been traditionally translated as rib. But here's where the mystery deepens. Tzila doesn't actually mean rib. In fact, when we examine the word closely, we discover that it almost never refers to a rib in the Bible. The word tzila is used throughout the Old Testament, but in nearly every other instance, it means something far larger, far more structural. It refers to the side of something, such as the side of a building or the side of a piece of furniture. In Exodus 25, for example, the word tzila is used to describe the side of the Ark of the Covenant. Not a rib, but the side of an object that carries weight and meaning. Similarly, in 1 Kings 6, when Solomon's temple is described, Selah refers to the side chambers that were part of the temple structure. And in Ezekiel 41, Selah refers to the massive sides of the sanctuary. In all these cases, Selah is used to describe something large, structural, and weight-bearing, not something small or expendable like a rib. So why, then, when we arrive at Genesis 2, does the word Selah suddenly shrink from a side into a rib? The answer doesn't lie in the Hebrew text itself, but in the choices made by translators many centuries ago. When the Hebrew Bible was translated into Greek, the Septuagint used the word pleura, which can mean both rib and side. The Latin Vulgate followed with the word costa, which also suggests a rib. Over time, this narrower meaning of rib became entrenched in tradition. Western Christianity accepted it without question. The rib became the image that was repeated in sermons, paintings, and illustrations until it became the default interpretation. And over time, no one remembered the original meaning of Selah. But what if we restore the original word? What if we return to the text and allow Selah to mean side, as it almost always does elsewhere in the Bible? Imagine the scene again. Adam is in a deep sleep, and God does not simply take a small, insignificant rib from his side. Instead, God divides Adam. He takes an entire side from Adam's body. This is not a small, minor act of creation. It's a profound, dramatic act. Eve is not created from a leftover piece. She is formed from half of Adam's being, bone of his bones, flesh of his flesh, because she literally was a part of him. If Eve was created from Adam's side, then woman is not a fragment, not an accessory, and certainly not an afterthought. She is one half of the original whole. This changes everything. The image of man and woman is no longer one of hierarchy, but of unity. The two are not separate. They are one, reflecting the fullness of God together. This is not just an act of creation. It is the language of unity, not hierarchy. It is a powerful message that changes how we view not only the creation of woman, but the entire story of humanity. A rib suggests something small and expendable. You can lose a rib and still survive. You can remove a rib from the body, and the person will not be the same, but they will still be whole. But a side, take away a side, and the whole structure collapses. If Eve came from Adam's side, then Adam was never complete without her. He was never whole until she was brought to him. The image of God was never meant to be reflected by man alone. It was always meant to be reflected in unity, man and woman together, reflecting the fullness of the Creator. This raises a profound question. Was Adam never meant to stand alone? Was the original design of humanity always intended to be a unity? Two distinct parts coming together to form the whole? Could it be that the first human was always meant to be divided? That the division between man and woman was not an afterthought, but a part of God's original plan? If this is true, then Eve was not a secondary creation. She was the unveiling of something already present within Adam, the feminine essence, the other side of humanity that could only be fully revealed when the two were separated. The implications of this understanding are far-reaching. For centuries, the story of the rib has been used to justify the idea of male superiority, suggesting that woman was an afterthought, a lesser part of creation, a mere support for man. But the Hebrew text refuses to let us accept this interpretation. The Hebrew text insists that Eve was not taken from Adam's head to rule over him. nor from his feet to be trampled upon by him, but from his side, to be his equal, his counterpart, his other self. When Adam first saw Eve, he didn't say, "This is mine." Instead, he cried out, "This is now bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh." This wasn't the language of ownership or subjugation. It was the language of recognition. Adam recognized Eve as his equal, as his other half, the missing part of himself. Without her, he was incomplete. Together, they were whole. And together, they reflected the fullness of God's image. This is the shocking truth hidden beneath centuries of tradition. The rib was never a rib at all. It was a side, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The verse before us presents a mystery so deep that it's often overlooked by many readers. At first glance, the story seems simple enough, but upon closer examination, it reveals a profound truth that challenges much of what we've been taught. According to the text, from the very beginning, Adam, the first human, contained within himself both masculine and feminine aspects. This is not some modern invention or an imaginative interpretation. It's a concept rooted in ancient Jewish tradition that predates our current understanding. The rabbis of old wrestled with this very idea long before it ever reached the minds of contemporary scholars or thinkers. In the Midrash Rabbah, specifically Genesis Rabbah 8:1, the rabbis described the first human as a being with two faces, one side male, the other female. This was not seen as an oddity or an exaggeration. Rather, it was viewed as a profound theological vision. Humanity, in its earliest form, was seen as a unity of opposites. The Talmud in Barakat 61a echoes this, explaining that the first human, Adam, was created with two faces and then split into two distinct parts. The point wasn't to provide a biological explanation, but to give us a glimpse into the divine purpose and vision behind creation. Adam, in this early state, was a dual being, both male and female, held together in one body. It was only through the divine will that the separation would occur, revealing the complementary nature of these two elements. Imagine Adam, not as the solitary figure we often envision, but as a mysterious, unified being, a single entity with two faces, one directed toward the east and the other toward the west. Two distinct natures coexisting within one body, waiting for the moment when they would be divided by God's hand. This image, though strange and unsettling, opens up a radically different possibility. Eve was never an afterthought, nor was she a secondary creation. She was always a part of Adam, hidden within him from the very start, waiting to be revealed. The moment of separation itself is not only a powerful image of creation, it's a cosmic event. God doesn't simply remove a small rib from Adam's body. No, he divides Adam in a way that is much deeper than that. He takes a whole side of Adam, not just a fragment, and forms Eve. This isn't a mere surgical procedure. It's an act of cosmic significance. It's the unfolding of a mystery that was always part of God's plan. Adam wakes up to find not just another being before him, but the other half of himself. Eve was not a simple addition to Adam's existence. She was the unveiling of something that was always part of his nature. Her creation is not an afterthought, not a mere support for man's story, but an essential part of the divine narrative. She is not derivative, nor is she secondary in any way. She is the missing piece, the half that completes humanity. To call Eve a fragment would be to miss the beauty and depth of the creation story in Genesis. She is integral to the whole. This interpretation, based on the ancient Jewish texts, has radical implications. If Adam, the first human, originally contained both male and female aspects, then both man and woman share equally in the image of God from the very beginning of creation. The divine image is not confined to maleness, nor is it restricted to femaleness. It is revealed fully in their union, in their complementary nature, and in their shared origin. Consider for a moment the verse in Genesis 5 verse 2, which says, "Male and female, he created them and blessed them and called their name Adam in the day when they were created." Notice something significant here. The text doesn't say their names were plural. Adam is singular. Both male and female, despite their distinct natures, were called by the same name. The name Adam defined them both, reflecting the unity of their creation. This wasn't two separate identities, but one identity expressed in two distinct forms. Theologically, this is a deeply powerful concept. Adam and Eve shared the same essence, the same identity. Together, they made up one humanity, one whole. The name Adam, in this context, becomes a symbol of that unity, showing that they were always intended to be two expressions of one divine image. This understanding takes us to the very heart of what the creation of Eve means for humanity. If Adam was created as a complete being, containing both masculine and feminine qualities, and if Eve was drawn from his side, then every union, every marriage, and every act of love between man and woman is not just a social contract. It's a restoration of the original unity. When man cleaves to woman, and the two become one flesh, they're not merely engaging in a physical or social act. They are returning to the state of wholeness that existed in the beginning. They are restoring the primal unity that was divided at creation. This radically shifts how we view human identity. For generations, the story of Eve being formed from Adam's rib was used to minimize the role of women in society, relegating them to a supporting role, a mere addition to the male story. But when we turn to the Hebrew text, to the insights of the Midrash and the Talmud, we discover a much deeper truth. Woman is not an accessory. She is half of the whole. Without her, humanity is incomplete. Without her, the image of God is fractured. This truth carries profound implications not only for theology, but also for culture and history. Patriarchal systems may have claimed male superiority, but the creation story itself undermines these claims at their very roots. From the very beginning, equality was woven into the fabric of humanity. Male and female were never meant to dominate one another. They were meant to complement each other, to live in dialogue, and to reflect the image of God in unity. When Adam first beholds Eve, his exclamation, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh," is not the language of ownership or subjugation. It is the language of recognition. Adam sees Eve and recognizes her as not just another being, but as his equal, his counterpart. He sees in her a reflection of himself, restored and revealed. This moment is one of awe, not of hierarchy. It is a reunion, not the establishment of a power structure. This chapter leaves us with a powerful question, one that cuts deeper than mere curiosity. If Eve was never a fragment, if she was always the unveiled half of Adam, what does that say about the divine intention behind her design? Her creation was not haphazard. She wasn't made from scraps. She was formed with divine purpose and architectural precision. And that brings us to the next profound revelation. Chapter 3, the divine architecture of woman. When the Hebrew text describes the creation of Eve, it doesn't use just any word. It doesn't say that God formed her from dust, as he did with Adam, nor does it suggest he molded her like clay. The word used to describe Eve's creation is bana, a word that means to build, to construct, to establish. This word is used in the Bible to describe the creation of altars, houses, cities, and even the grand temple of Solomon. This choice of word tells us something profound. Eve wasn't an afterthought. She wasn't a mere add-on to Adam's story. She was built, crafted with the same intentionality and care that went into the construction of the holiest places in Israel's worship. God did not improvise her creation. He didn't throw her together in haste. No, she was built. She was constructed piece by piece with divine purpose. In the same way that the temple in Jerusalem was meticulously planned, with every detail, every pillar, every carving, every measurement, so too was Eve carefully and purposefully designed. The distinction here is not about superiority, but about intentionality. Eve was not created out of the same raw material as Adam. She was made from material that was already alive, already infused with the breath of God, the very side of Adam, a living substance. This is where the true depth of the creation narrative becomes clear. Adam's creation was a raw beginning, formed from dust. But Eve's creation was something entirely different. She wasn't formed from the ground. She was built from something already alive, something already infused with life and spirit. This distinction isn't about hierarchy. It's about the artistry of the Creator. Eve's creation was a masterpiece, a divine work of architecture. The theological implications of this revelation are truly staggering. For centuries, patriarchal cultures have relegated women to the role of a helper, an assistant, someone added to the story of man, but the Hebrew text resists such diminishment. By choosing the word bana, meaning to build, the text elevates the woman to the level of sacred architecture. She is not merely a secondary creation, but a masterpiece, carefully crafted with divine intention. Eve, then, is like a temple, designed as a place where the presence of God is meant to dwell, constructed with purpose, strength, and structure. Consider the proverb from Proverbs 14, verse 1. The wise woman builds her house. The verb here, builds, is the same one used to describe the creation of Eve. In this, wisdom and construction are inseparable. In the Bible, wisdom is not a mere ornament. It is divine in nature. The act of building, therefore, is not a casual one. It is sacred. In this sense, Eve's creation is not one of fragility, but of strength. She is not a spontaneous afterthought, but a reflection of divine wisdom and intentionality. The very act of her creation carries a message of endurance and purpose, demonstrating that her design was neither accidental nor arbitrary. The imagery of architecture that surrounds Eve's creation brings with it another important layer: stability. In the ancient world, the sides of the temple, the pillars of a house, or the walls of a tabernacle were the elements that bore the weight and defined the sanctity of the structure. Without them, there would be no dwelling place of God. In the same way, the woman is not ornamental, but structural to the very fabric of creation. Humanity itself could not stand without her. She is the side, the essential wall of creation. Without her, the whole house would collapse. 4 generations, the translation of Eve being created from a rib allowed cultures to view women as small, disposable, secondary beings, an afterthought in God's plan. But if Eve was built with divine purpose, then every inch of her being was intentional. She was not thrown together or constructed carelessly. She was built with the same thought and precision as a cathedral. The arches, the walls, the windows, they were all designed with meaning. Each element of her being had a purpose. So too with Eve. Every aspect of her form was selected, designed, and built by God Himself. She is not a spare part of creation. She is sacred. This declaration shatters centuries of distortion. To call Eve sacred is not mere sentimentality. It's theology. It means that her presence in the world is indispensable to the revelation of God's image. Her existence, her creation, and her purpose are integral to the story of humanity. The divine design is incomplete without her. When Adam looked upon her and exclaimed, "This is now bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh," he was not merely recognizing a leftover piece. He was recognizing a completed design, one that mirrored his own. If Eve was indeed built as a divine structure, then to misunderstand her is to misunderstand the very architecture of creation itself. To treat her as lesser is to dismantle the temple that God created. This is why, centuries later, Jesus honored women in a way that scandalized his culture. He knew that women were not spare parts. They were sacred, crafted with the same intentionality as the temple he called his Father's house. What does this mean for us? It challenges every assumption that has ever devalued the feminine. It invites us to see women not as an addition to creation, but as an equal partner, not as fragile beings, but as foundational to the story of humanity. Women are not mere ribs tucked away and forgotten. They're the very side of humanity itself, built with divine architecture and carrying the wisdom and strength of the Creator's own design. This revelation leads us to the next question. If Eve was built as a sacred structure, what happened between her creation and the fall? Why did this divine architecture fracture? To understand that, we must turn to Eden's darkest hour, the moment when unity gave way to division. Chapter 4, From Unity to Division, the Fall's Tragedy. For a brief, shining moment, creation was whole. Adam looked upon Eve and declared with joy, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh." These words, found in Genesis 2, are not cold theological statements. They are poetry, the cry of recognition. Adam sees Eve not as foreign, not as inferior, but as his equal reflection. They are united in a profound harmony. Two beings, two sides, face to face, complete. In that moment, the story of humanity shines with the brilliance of unity. But that harmony would not last. Genesis 3 introduces a new voice, one that weaves lies into the fabric of innocence. The serpent. With cunning words, the serpent approaches Eve. Did God really say? The question is not just a temptation. It is an attempt to fracture trust, to sow doubt. Eve listens, and in that moment, the narrative pivots. She takes the fruit, and in doing so, she initiates the tragic unraveling of the perfect unity. She gives it to Adam, and he too eats. The eyes of both are opened, but not to glory. They awaken to shame. The beauty of bone of my bones collapses into fear. The two who were once naked and unashamed now scramble to cover themselves. They hide from the Creator who had once walked with them in the cool of the day. The intimacy of Eden is shattered. The unity of the first couple is fractured. Where once there was recognition, now there is hiding. Where there was joy, now there is suspicion. The blame game begins. When God confronts Adam, his response is not one of humility. He doesn't admit his own choice. Instead, he points the finger. The woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I ate. In that single sentence, Adam shifts the blame to both Eve and God. The woman, once bone of his bones, now becomes the scapegoat. When God turns to Eve, she too shifts the responsibility. The serpent deceived me, and I ate. The chain of unity is shattered. The harmony that once existed between man and woman is broken. Man blames woman, and woman blames the serpent. What was once a partnership now descends into rivalry. This, at its core, is the true tragedy of the fall. It's not just that humanity sinned against God. It's that humanity fractured against itself. The unity that God created in the beginning, the divine design that was meant to reflect his image, is broken. And then, the chilling words of Genesis 3 verse 16 are spoken. Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. For centuries, this verse has been misread as a divine command, as if God had ordained male dominance. But in the original Hebrew, this is not a prescription. It is a description of the consequence of sin. Sin introduces a hierarchy where God had originally created equality. Domination is the shadow of brokenness, not the light of creation. Imagine a scene unfolding before your eyes. Adam, who once stood with Eve as her equal, now turns against her in blame. Eve, who was once the unveiled side of humanity, now stands diminished, her dignity torn by the new order that sin has introduced. The serpent, now victorious in its deception, slithers away, leaving behind a garden that was once full of harmony and now lies in ruins. Eden, once a sanctuary of unity, becomes the stage for division and tragedy. The first fracture in humanity's story has occurred, and with it, the divine architecture is disrupted. The fracture of Eden has reverberated through the corridors of human history ever since. The rupture that occurred in that sacred garden didn't just bring spiritual separation from God. It also caused a profound relational division between man and woman. What was once united as one flesh was now torn apart by mistrust, blame, and control. This split has been woven into the fabric of patriarchal societies that sought to silence women, societies that confused hierarchy with holiness. The real tragedy of the fall was not only the estrangement from God, but the breakdown of the partnership between man and woman. Yet, even within the sorrow of this separation, there's a whisper of a deeper truth, a truth that speaks to God's original design of unity, partnership, and equality. The command to rule, often misinterpreted as divine mandate, was never part of Eden's first harmony. It only emerged as a consequence of sin, meaning hierarchy was never the divine intention. It was a distortion of the original plan. Even in the midst of brokenness, the blueprint of creation still pointed towards something greater, something waiting to be restored. As the story unfolds, we see Adam and Eve, now clothed in skins, banished from the garden, with the gates of Eden guarded by flaming swords. The image is one of loss, of exile. But even here, in the shadow of despair, there is the glimmer of hope. The Creator does not abandon his creation. He covers their shame, even as he pronounces their exile. And in his words to the serpent, he plants a promise. One day, the seed of the woman will crush the serpent's head. Even amidst fracture and loss, the seed of restoration is sown. If division and hierarchy were never part of the divine plan, but were instead the bitter fruits of rebellion, then is there a way back? Can the broken unity of Adam and Eve be healed? Can humanity once again rediscover the partnership that God originally intended? The answer to these questions waits in the next chapter of the story. The shadows of Eden are not the end. Someone is coming, a second Adam, to restore what the first had lost. Someone who would return humanity to the blueprint of unity, to the harmonious side-by-side relationship of male and female reflecting the image of God together. Centuries after Adam and Eve left the garden, humanity still carried the weight of their fall. Division had become the norm. Men ruled over women. Societies built structures of hierarchy. The equality woven into the very fabric of creation had been buried under the weight of cultural customs and traditions. But then, in the fullness of time, Jesus came. The New Testament calls him the second Adam, not because he repeated the mistakes of the first, but because he came to undo them. Where the first Adam introduced division, the second Adam came to restore unity. In Matthew 19, we hear Jesus speak of the original design, saying, "For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh." Jesus wasn't inventing a new teaching. He was reaching all the way back to Genesis, to the moment before the fall, before division, when the first man and woman were united in perfect harmony. He bypassed the hierarchical order introduced in Genesis 3 and pointed instead to the original unity found in Genesis 2. Jesus reminded his listeners of the moment when Adam and Eve stood side by side, united, equal, bone of bone, flesh of flesh. Jesus did not accept the patriarchal order of his time as God's eternal will. He cut through centuries of distortion to remind the people of the harmony that had been meant from the beginning. By doing so, he revealed his mission, not to confirm broken systems, but to restore what had been lost in the fall. The way Jesus lived confirmed this mission. In a culture where women were silenced, he gave them voices. In a world where they were often invisible, he made them seen. Consider the Samaritan woman at the well in John 4. No rabbi in his time would have wasted words on such a figure. A woman, a Samaritan, burdened with scandal. Yet Jesus not only spoke with her, he revealed to her something he had told almost no one else, that he was the Messiah. In that moment, he entrusted her with the extraordinary news of his identity. She ran back to her village, becoming one of the first evangelists to share the gospel. Or think of Mary Magdalene. In a society where women's testimony was considered invalid in court, Jesus entrusted her with the most significant announcement in history, the resurrection. He said to her, "Go and tell my brothers." The first to proclaim the risen Christ was not Peter, not John, but Mary. In this single act, Jesus turned cultural assumptions upside down, declaring that in his kingdom, the equality of man and woman was being restored. Everywhere Jesus went, he dismantled the walls built by sin. He welcomed Mary of Bethany to sit at his feet as a disciple, a place no woman would have been allowed to occupy in that time. He defended the woman caught in adultery, not by excusing her sin, but by protecting her dignity from the cruelty of men eager to stone her. He praised the faith of a Canaanite woman, breaking down both ethnic and gender barriers with a single exchange. Each of these encounters was a declaration that the old order of domination was finished. A new creation was beginning. Christ's mission was not just to forgive sins in an abstract sense. He came to restore relationships, both between God and humanity and between man and woman. He reweaved the original design that had been torn apart in Eden. In him, the fracture is healed. The side is brought back into harmony. Paul captured this profound truth in Galatians 3 verse 28, where he writes, "There is neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither bond nor free, there is neither male nor female. For you are all one in Christ Jesus." These words do not erase the differences between people. Paul does not deny the reality of male and female, but he proclaims that in Christ, these differences are not to be used to dominate or diminish one another. All stand on equal ground before the cross. All reflect the image of God together. The unity that Adam and Eve shared in the beginning, fractured by sin, is now restored in Christ. The second Adam reverses the curse of the first. Where shame and blame once ruled, grace and partnership now reign. Where hierarchy once pressed down, equality rises up. This is not just theology, it is revolution. Jesus treated women with a dignity that unsettled his contemporaries, and his actions still challenge cultures today. He reminded the world that the original design was never about hierarchy or domination. It was about harmony, equality, and communion. Jesus' words in Matthew 19, his actions with the Samaritan woman, and his commissioning of Mary Magdalene all point back to the blueprint of Eden and forward to the kingdom of God. But the story doesn't end here. If Jesus restored the side, if he reversed the division, then the question remains, how does this restoration carry forward into our lives today? How does his victory reshape our communities, our marriages, and the way humanity understands identity? That question leads us to the final revelation. For the story of Eve is not just about the past. The redemption of the side, the restoration of unity, is a present and future reality, one that still has the power to transform us all. The image of God. This is the profound message that the forgotten truth of the Ethiopian Bible reveals to us today. It challenges the way we have understood relationships, gender, and community for centuries. The Bible's original language, with its rich depth and nuances, has been misinterpreted for too long. But now, as we begin to peel back the layers of tradition, we can rediscover the essence of God's original design for humanity. For centuries, the story of Eve being created from Adam's rib has shaped how we view gender roles, marriages, and the role of women in society. It has been used to justify hierarchies, domination, and the silencing of women. But the Ethiopian Bible, with its preservation of the original meaning, offers a powerful corrective. The truth that Eve was created from Adam's side, not from a rib, shifts everything. It restores dignity, equality, and partnership, core values that are central to God's plan for creation. Imagine a world where relationships are not driven by domination, but by mutual respect and love. What if we saw each other as equals, standing side by side, reflecting God's glory together? What if marriages were not about who holds power, but about walking in harmony, each person contributing equally to the partnership? Imagine communities where both men and women are honored for their unique gifts, and the image of God is reflected in unity rather than division. This is the radical change that the true meaning of Genesis 2 invites us to embrace. That question leads us to the final revelation. For the story of Eve is not just about the past. The redemption of the side, the restoration of unity, is a present and future reality, one that still has the power to transform us all. The image of God. This is the profound message that the forgotten truth of the Ethiopian Bible reveals to us today. It challenges the way we have understood relationships, gender, and community for centuries. The Bible's original language, with its rich depth and nuances, has been misinterpreted for too long. But now, as we begin to peel back the layers of tradition, we can rediscover the essence of God's original design for humanity. For centuries, the story of Eve being created from Adam's rib has shaped how we view gender roles, marriages, and the role of women in society. It has been used to justify hierarchies, domination, and the silencing of women. But the Ethiopian Bible, with its preservation of the original meaning, offers a powerful corrective. The truth that Eve was created from Adam's side, not from a rib, shifts everything. It restores dignity, equality, and partnership, core values that are central to God's plan for creation. Imagine a world where relationships are not driven by domination, but by mutual respect and love. What if we saw each other as equals, standing side by side, reflecting God's glory together? What if marriages were not about who holds power, but about walking in harmony, each person contributing equally to the partnership? Imagine communities where both men and women are honored for their unique gifts, and the image of God is reflected in unity rather than division. This is the radical change that the true meaning of Genesis 2 invites us to embrace. This is not just a theological discussion. It is practical, life-changing truth. It's about how we treat one another in our everyday relationships, how we approach marriage, and how we build our communities. The restoration of the side, the return to the original design of unity and partnership, offers us a new way forward. It calls us to honor each other, to build relationships on mutual respect and shared purpose, and to create a world where power is not the measure of value, but love and equality are. And this is just the beginning. As we uncover more of the truths hidden in ancient texts, what other treasures await us? What if the story of Eve and Adam is merely one piece of a much larger puzzle waiting to be discovered? The more we delve into the ancient scriptures, the more we realize that God's message is far richer and more profound than we have understood. What we have learned here is not just a lesson about the past. It is a call to action for how we live today. So, as we continue to explore the depths of Scripture, the ancient witness of the Ethiopian Bible, and the restoration of God's original design for humanity, we invite you to join us in this journey. There's so much more to uncover, and together, we can rediscover the beauty of unity and partnership that was always meant to define us. If you found this truth eye-opening, we encourage you to stay with us on this path of discovery. Don't miss out on the revelations still to come. Keep watching, keep learning, and together, let's explore the mysteries that will reshape the way we see each other and the world around us. Thank you for watching. If you've been inspired by this message, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss the next chapter in this incredible journey. Together, we can uncover more hidden truths, and together, we can reflect the fullness of God's image in the world.